Hi, I'm Dr. Craig Malkin, and welcome back to my podcast series about my book, Rethinking Narcissism, The Bad and Surprising Good About Feeling Special, also known in the UK as the Narcissist Test. And today I'm going to be talking to you about social media, the whole question of whether or not social media causes narcissism, which you've probably heard, whether it's responsible for, in part, for a narcissism epidemic, how we should handle our social media if we have concerns about it cranking out narcissists around the world, particularly in millennials, and what we should do if we think we've encountered someone who's extremely narcissistic in the world of social media, because there are ways to handle that too. So a lot more practical information here. Again, this is all drawing on some of this research is from 2015. I really rolled up my sleeves and tried to pull things together in a way that they hadn't been pulled together before, because there's been so much of confusion about social media. And what's interesting is since this book was published, I actually have 6 rules really based on the research for using social media in healthier ways in my book. I call this healthy approach to social media because the abbreviation for social media is often so me, which I thought was incredibly telling. And it says so much about our associations with social media at this point. But I think there are ways of using it in a healthy manner, and I lay those out based on the research. I'm going to touch on those points, maybe one or two. Again, I can't get into a tremendous amount of detail for a podcast episode, but I can certainly give you enough of an understanding that you can navigate the world a little bit more easily and answer some questions that you have about what exactly social media is doing to us or to our children. So this question, has social media made all of us more narcissistic, in particular millennials narcissistic? Well, the first thing I should say is that I critique the idea of there being a narcissism epidemic in Rethinking Narcissism. It's one of the rethinks in Rethinking Narcissism. And spoiler alert, I do not find the evidence convincing. I should also mention that this is another one of these ideas that I lay out before all of this had been pulled together in my attempts to bring it together. My conclusion has since been confirmed by direct research. There was a recent study that suggested that most of our ideas about millennials can be attributed to negative stereotyping. So I'm not convinced there's a narcissism epidemic anyway, for any number of reasons, and I go into those in depth in the first part of Rethinking Narcissism. But there is this question, can social media make us more narcissistic? I struggled with this in my own way. When I first entered the world of social media, I had to, in order to become an author, I was advised you need a social media presence. You need to be on Twitter and Facebook, which, by the way, I am. If you want to go to my page, drcraigmalcolm.com, you'll find me on Twitter and Facebook. I'm quite active there, and I share a lot of information there as well. But I was told you've got to have a presence. So I spoke to a friend of mine, and he walked me through it, and I was just completely bewildered. He's telling me about how and when to retweet, and I'm looking at Twitter, and all I can see is celebrities who seem to be pushing product, and people think they're talking to them, and people sending out tweets like, "Oh, my dog just threw up," #gross, and I really couldn't see the use of it. On Facebook, I shared my first article I shared my first article on social media. It wasn't my first article, but it was the first time I shared an article on Facebook, and it did miserably because, of course, I didn't really have many fans on my site yet. But I couldn't help but compare myself to a friend who had posted something about giants suck and had something like 80 comments. And I just, between looking at how little attention I was getting on my personal Facebook page and then like going over the professional and seeing how poorly I was doing there, I mostly felt like I didn't feel very important at all, and I kind of felt a little bad that I wasn't getting likes. So I could see how easy it is to get caught up in that whole idea of searching after the likes. And so this launched me on this journey to look at the research and find out, the question is social media narcissistic? The answer is yes, of course it is, because we're drawing attention to ourselves. We are sharing pictures, we're sharing things about us, and people respond with likes and comments, and we get a little boost from that. That is really inherently narcissistic. But does it have to be of the unhealthy variety? To me, was the more interesting question. In other words, can social media even help us have that experience of healthy narcissism where we view ourselves through slightly rose-colored glasses without us getting caught up in, oh my gosh, I don't have enough likes? And so I started looking at the research, and I was immediately lost. Because I'm sure if you've listened to any of the articles, any of the stories, or read any of the articles on the internet, one day you'll hear social media is making us all depressed and lonely. It's driving us all into despair. We all feel terrible about ourselves. And then, of course, the next day you hear a study that says social media is making us all narcissists, right? That's part of the narcissism epidemic. Everybody is becoming vacuous and superficial and posting selfies. Look at the selfies. And people are posting scantily clad selfies of themselves, and we're all pitching off a cliff or disappearing into the abyss of narcissism. So social media both makes us miserable and lonely and feel terrible about ourselves, and makes us hide in the shadows. And social media apparently is also responsible for making us more narcissistic than we ever have been. Although, as I've said, that is not something that's widely accepted in psychology at this point. There's a huge debate about that. And then there was this recent study that confirmed my critique in Rethinking Narcissism, suggesting that the whole idea of a narcissism epidemic is really something that we should be really concerned about spreading stereotypes about millennials. But the point is, this is obviously very contradictory. Social media seems to be doing everything bad, but there are all kinds of different bad things, and often opposite to each other, making us echoists and making us narcissists at the same time. And how do you make sense of it? And that was what I had to figure out. And what I came to in sorting through it all, what became clear to me is the problem is that we think of social media as one single tool, or at least that's how researchers were approaching it, when in fact, there are so many different tools. And it is not simply a matter of posting selfies or, posting blogs about ourselves, and that's all social media is. It's so many things. We of course have Pinterest, where you can share images, your favorite images, and that links to articles. We have what are called microblogging platforms. I'm on one of them. Twitter, where you can only share short bursts of information. Tumblr is similar. It's microblogging. And we have profile-based platforms. Facebook, Google+, There may be more developing. I suppose MySpace, I don't know how popular it is anymore, but I suppose MySpace is a profile-based platform. We feel very different when we're using these things. We interact with them differently. So I realize that the reason we're getting all these contradictory results is that researchers, and maybe all of us, were thinking about this as too unitary a fashion. And that it's much better, instead of asking the question, do Facebook and Twitter cause loneliness or narcissism? That's a little bit like asking, do Iceland or Russia cause cancer or depression? The answer obviously depends on where you spend your time and what you do when you're there. And that is the same with social media. Think of them like cultures, customs, with their own customs or rules. So as soon as you start thinking about it the way, it becomes a lot clearer that it all depends on how we use social media, which makes sense. And there's clear evidence in the research for ways that social media can help us feel more connected and open up, and even have those slightly rose-colored glasses that we associate with healthy narcissism, and ways that it can cut us off and shut us down, or even make us more narcissistic, push us towards the extremes of narcissism. Whether there's even one study, and I want to say a little bit about it because it is so helpful in untangling this. There was a study done where the researchers split people into groups, and they had them fiddle on Google Maps and sort of map their way through campus, and another group edited their MySpace profile. Both groups had MySpace profiles, but only one of them was permitted an allotted amount of time, something, I think they had 15 minutes. They measured their narcissism scores before and after doing this, because you can actually use the Narcissistic Personality Inventory, which I mentioned earlier in a podcast episode, to measure people's level of narcissism, not just as a fixed thing, but as a state. And they measured them before and after. Now, MySpace at the time, you got to remember, this is 2009, 2008. It may have changed since then, but MySpace at the time was notorious for being a place where people tried to compete, basically, to post the most provocative things, wearing skimpy outfits or blasting profanity across their pages, really attention getters, basically. And the researchers assumed that if people spend more time doing this, their narcissism levels are going to rise. So they compared them to the students who were just playing with Google Maps and fiddling with that and mapping out the campus, and they compared them to the students who were using MySpace. And sure enough, what they found was that after they had spent that time editing their MySpace profiles, the students' narcissism scores went up. And they went up significantly. I don't know that there has been a real increase in narcissism that you've heard about from Narcissism Epidemic, but even if we believe that to be true, the difference between generations that they found was of 2 points. 2 points. And that was important enough to declare a narcissism epidemic. Again, since then, the validity of those 2 points has been called into doubt. But what I want to say is the difference between the students who were on Google Maps and the ones who were on MySpace was also 2 points. This was the first study, the only study, to my knowledge so far, because it was an experiment that showed cause, that showed that spending time in a social media platform and using it in a way that actually is all about calling attention to yourself and all about polishing up your image could increase people's narcissism. And interestingly, the researchers were smart and they looked at individual items. And so if the items that went up were just something like I'm assertive, we wouldn't worry. But the items that went up are ones that are notoriously unhealthy in the research, like everybody loves the stories I tell, I think was one of them, or I always know what I'm doing. I always know what I'm doing. That was one of the things they were more likely to agree with after they were on MySpace. So you can see all this ties together. Earlier I was talking about this brand new research showing what reduces narcissism. It all seems to be a part of the drive to feel special, and there's lots of ways to do that. And what happens when people's narcissism goes up, all those other sort of ways of feeling special goes up, like believing that, you're always right, or seeking fame. And likewise, when we remind people who are narcissistic of connection and caring and encourage them to think in those ways in the studies, the narcissism goes down in all the different forms. The other interesting arm of the study that you need to know about, because it gets at how to use social media in healthy ways, was that in another comparison, they compared another group of students using Google Maps. And the second group this time wasn't MySpace. It was people, again, all the students had MySpace and all the students had Facebook profiles. So they had one group of students focus on the Google Maps and navigating that, and they had the other group of students focus on editing and working on and responding to things on their Facebook page. And they measured their narcissism. I should mention in both of these arms of the study, they mentioned narcissism and self-esteem, narcissism and self-esteem as a state measure before and after. So in this arm of the study, when they measured the narcissism, the students who were using Facebook, their self-esteem went up and their narcissism did not. And if you'll remember from our discussion of healthy narcissism, that ability to see ourselves through slightly rose-colored glasses, the self-esteem is a part of that. It's one of those gifts of healthy narcissism. So you can think of this as an indirect measure of healthy narcissism. They capture just sort of using self-esteem because a piece of it as a proxy for healthy narcissism. And the researchers' conclusion was that when we use social media, when the students use the social media in a way that was about being a part of a community, that was about connecting instead of just primping and preening, that their self-esteem got a boost and their narcissism didn't. Using the NPI, which tends to tap this more extroverted kind of narcissism, but also some of the nastier qualities. So what this tells us is that it confirms that it is not social media that makes us narcissists. It is inherently narcissistic, social media, by its nature, by its very nature. But that what matters most as to whether or not social media promotes healthy aspects of narcissism is how we use it. If we want to use social media, if we want to engage social media in a way that is good for us, that lifts our spirits, that does not get us caught up in a game of how many likes we have, or how popular our latest post was, then we have to be very mindful about the way that we use it. And this points a direct and clear path towards the way to use it properly and to help our children use it properly. I was asked at a recent book reading if this is being taught in schools or in universities. And I think it should be. Left to our own devices, we clearly feel at a loss with all this technology that somehow we're just going to blindly stumble through and we're going to be able to use it in ways that are good for us and not bad for us. And obviously that's not the case. We need some guidance. And so that was why I wrote this chapter, the healthy use of social media, And so one of the main points, and this is another thing that has since been confirmed directly by research. Before I wrote Rethinking Narcissism, there was no direct research on this, but now this has since been confirmed that that what helps us feel better about ourselves in healthy ways, what in other words helps us develop that sense of resilience and rose-colored glasses, that's all part of healthy narcissism, not necessarily seeing ourselves realistically, but with a slightly rosy glow. What helps us feel better in social media is connecting with people. As you learned, people who are extremely narcissistic are afraid to depend on others for connection. They're afraid that if they are open about what's going on in their lives, if they're sad or lonely or scared, that if they try to depend on someone, that they will not be there for them. And so they turn to feeling special instead. It's very easy to turn to feeling special in social media. For the days or weeks or moments our post or image is up there, we do feel special, especially when we're getting attention. So it's easy to have that be an empty search for the kinds of sense of uniqueness and exceptionality that becomes so overdriven that we tip into unhealthy narcissism. It's easy to see how that can happen. But the cure, as the cure is in relationships, is authentic connection. So one of the bumper stickers, or one of the headlines, if you will, from this research, I think, and from my chapter on So We, is share, don't compare. If you want to take home, if you want to walk away with this from this podcast with just something easy to hold on to, I try to give a lot of these easy things to hold on to make it simple. Just in the same way I did in helping you navigate relationships, with giving you the 3 stop signs and giving you templates for how to talk to people to test out whether or not there's hope and move on if there isn't. I wanted to give very simple rules. So I have 6 rules for using social media in a healthy way, for approaching So We. And really what cuts through all of them is share, don't compare. Example, if you are sharing a selfie, that does not have to be an act of unhealthy narcissism. You can connect with people by sharing selfies. There's a new phenomenon called relfies, where people share just relationship pictures. So I suppose that's a version of a selfie, but of course that's all about connection. But a better example is, there was this really popular story in the news recently I just loved. I don't know if you saw it, about this guy who was on vacation, and he couldn't go on vacation with his wife, so he was by himself, and he took selfies every day and he sent them to her. But the selfies were of him looking grumpy, of him looking like he wasn't having a good time in these really fantastic locations, the beach or in a fancy looking restaurant. And it looked grumpy. And of course, these are selfies, but he was telling a story. He was reaching out to his wife. He was connecting to her, and he was doing it in a humorous way. And all of these things, these are ways of using social media that bring us closer together. That to me is So We in its essence. It's share, don't compare. If you are spending all of your time, here's another example that we know from the research. I give as a rule. Do not image churn. Avoid image churning. Remember the MySpace study? These were people who were spending all their time using a social media platform that, at least at that moment in history, was very geared towards attention seeking. And their narcissism score went up. And there is research by a researcher, I believe his name is Christopher Carpenter, who looked at how people use social media, and in particular Facebook, and measured them on narcissism, and then looked at how more narcissistic people use social media. And the more narcissistic people were, the more likely they were to post constant updates, because this is a way of calling attention. The more likely they were to change their profile image frequently, because every time you do that, it calls attention to you. The more likely they were to tag themselves in posts or in photos. They did all of that more frequently than anyone else, the more narcissistic they were. Because again, that is not about reaching out to people. That is not sharing. Really, indirectly, it's about comparing, because I'm sure what they were looking for is to get the highest number of likes that they could. I call that image churning. And we don't know if that's going to cause narcissism, but the MySpace study was an experiment, so it showed narcissism went up. So it's a sure bet, at least, that using narcissism in this way isn't going to be healthy for us. So what I want you to take from this, the take home for this, we need to move towards a so-we use of social media. We need to be fostering these healthy ways of reaching out to others. If you are sharing a post on Facebook and you're only sharing the good stuff, you're only sharing the best parts of your life, you're creating a sort of smoothly polished avatar. And that affects us. And in a sense, we feel like we're hiding parts of ourselves the more time we spend on social media. And I think this accounts for the finding that a lot of times when people are just sort of passively using social media, in other words, hiding in it, and simply watching posts zip by, they feel worse about themselves. The same is true with people who interact less. That was what that recent research showed. It confirmed what I'm saying in Rethinking Narcissism about share, don't compare, about making connections first. Because again, that is what keeps any of us from becoming extremely narcissistic. And interestingly, that is also what gives us the rose-colored glasses. Just to repeat what I said earlier, it is the ability to open up to others, to test out depending on them when we are in moments that are not the best times of our lives, when we're sad, we're lonely, we're scared, when we're worried. We can reach out to them and know that one special person or persons or friends, partners can be there for us. That's what gives us the rose-colored glasses. That's what we've seen. People in the research, people who feel securely attached, moderately self-enhance. So it's reasonable to assume that we can get that, especially because of that finding out people's self-esteem going up. It's reasonable to assume that we can get that through social media, as long as we focus on and emphasize what's social about social media first. Emphasize the social, not the me part. So, as I said, I go into much more detail about the specific ways that you can do this, but I've given you one or two just now. And I even talk more in Rethinking Narcissism about, how we can think about it with our kids and what we might need to monitor there, and how we can keep all of ourselves more healthy in social media, and so that it doesn't have to be this inherently solipsistic, self-involved culture. And I really think it can actually do a great deal of good for the world. If you think about the number of movements that have started in social media that have opened up awareness about emotion, about a physical and emotional abuse, about cancer, the potential is enormous. So again, what you can take away: share, don't compare. And if you can keep that in mind and be mindful of that, that sort of leads the way to all of the different approaches that we can use using social media in a more so-we fashion. So If you're interested in learning more and you are interested in buying the book, you go to www.drcraigmalkin.com, the book, and you'll find links for both the UK and the US. The German one is on its way. I don't know if I'm going to be having German speakers listening to this, but it will be coming out in German. I've known that for quite some time. It was Germany bought it before it came out before it came out at all. So, and I just saw the cover for it. So hopefully I can get that up there soon and even have links to it. But so that there's a UK version, the Narcissist test, and the US version. And again, I've got all kinds of, if you just want to do a preview and see what you think, I've got information about what you learn in the book. I've got free videos that give you an idea of the kinds of things that I address in Rethinking Narcissism, the way I think about unhealthy narcissism and how to approach it. And you'll also find plenty of critical reviews from places like the New York Times and Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, and from colleagues, from senior colleagues in the field who are in answer to the question, why rethink narcissism? Their answer is, well, there's a lot of good that's coming from rethinking narcissism, and they feel it's extremely helpful, and I hope you do too. So, and again, you can also go to the narcissismtest.com if you haven't already done it, and take the brief online version of the narcissism spectrum scale. I call the narcissism test. It gives you a rough estimate. It won't give you the same detail as you find in the book. The full test in the book can actually help you pinpoint yourself on the spectrum from 0 to 10. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I hope it's helped you understand all of this a lot more. I hope it helps you figure out what's going on in your relationships. Shared a lot of information from the book, and there's a lot more to say, but I'm hoping this gives you a start on figuring out how to protect yourself, what you can do to, say, find your voice if you struggle with echoism, and how you can interact with loved ones when you're concerned, to see if there's any possibility at all. Because the other thing that I hope you've taken from this is there are subtler, milder forms of narcissism because it's on a spectrum, and for some people there's hope, for some people there isn't, and we can easily find out the difference. It doesn't have to take weeks. I mean, it doesn't have to take months, doesn't have to take years. It can take a matter of weeks, and I help you do that in Rethinking Narcissism. So again, you can go to www.drcraigmalkin.com to find out more. And you can follow me and find out my social media presence on Twitter and Facebook, and follow me there. And I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy Rethinking Narcissism as much as all the readers have so far. I've had a tremendous amount of great feedback, and I'm just so happy that people are finding it helpful, and I hope you do too. Take care.